Episode 5 of Only Murders in the Building is here, and there were a few key themes that were explored that definitely brought us closer to pinning the murder of Lester and Nikki on some new suspects. Following last week's episode where we saw how silence was the real thing that the billionaires wanted to buy after befriending and lying to the trio, this episode was all about connecting to the difference in new versus old when it came to the future of the Arconia, the changing ways, but also the hunt for Tommy the Tongue. A name that kept popping up when it came to the night of Lester's death, with an ending that showed us a potential shared motive for both Lester and Nikki being killed. Let's dive into this episode and break down all the important details. Here is Only Murders in the Building Season 5, Episode 5, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained and the latest suspects. Titled Tongue-Tied, this episode was all about leaning into the fact that there was an apparent person that was there on the night that Lester was killed called Tommy the Tongue, who all of the services went through within the Arconia and nobody knew who it actually was, nor was anybody willing to share who they were if they did know. It was only right at the end of the episode where the trio received a present from Miller for them sticking up for the workers of the Arconia, where there was an invoice on the artwork for bottles of liquor, which one would have to assume was for the casino that was underneath the Arconia, which were made out to Tommy on the night that Lester died. However, right at the end of the episode, it was revealed that Tommy the Tongue wasn't actually a person. It was actually a company that was worth a lot of money, and all of the money had recently been withdrawn. With Charles's phone being taken by Sofia after they spent the night together, they tracked it and it led to the same address that was on the invoice for Tommy the Tongue. This address turned out to be the home of Lester's wife, Lorraine. Now, with Sofia meeting with Lorraine, that obviously implicates them in having some involvement or presence there on the night that Lester died, and I think there's a strong theory that could tie into it. This theory comes from something that we saw in this episode with Sofia and also from episode 2, which was focused on Lester's flashback. When Charles was with Sofia in the restaurant, Sofia mentioned how Nikki promised her that he'd give the both of them a life that was away from construction, which was a code word for the fact that he was involved in criminal activity. This was something that she said that she always wanted because she didn't want to be wrapped up in crime. This is also something that's relatively similar to the likes of Lester and Lorraine's marriage. Lester felt as though he'd done his time as a doorman and was looking at retiring, as we saw in the flashback in episode 2. However, with Nick having a hold over Lester and refusing to allow him to retire because Nikki didn't want to trust any other doorman, it meant that Lester was stuck working there due to the shady underworld, and him and his wife Lorraine weren't able to enjoy the rest of their life together in the way that they wanted to. This shows that both of the wives essentially felt trapped in their marriages and they weren't living the lives that they wanted to live, with the both of them most likely being aware of what was going on in the casino and the relationship between Nikki and Lester. I wonder if the both of them could have had something to do with the deaths of both of their husbands. As we saw, Tommy the Tongue was a company and all of the money was just withdrawn from it. So it makes me question if they had their husbands killed so that they could stand to get the money and then live the life of freedom that they both wanted, rather than feeling like they were standing still and were trapped due to no fault of their own. It's just one theory for now, and one that I think does have some weight to it. I did get a bit of a suspicious vibe from Sofia in this episode when she was with Charles. Almost as if it wasn't Nikki that was the person that everybody should have been worried about, and that Sofia could have maybe been the one that was calling the shots. It wouldn't surprise me, and it would make quite a cool twist. She's not always been clear with Charles, so I think that could have something to do with it. Outside of the ending, where we saw the hunt for Tommy the Tongue, we also saw that there was a focus on the staff feeling like there was a divide between themselves and the tenants following the Lester robot being recruited into the Arconia. The staff felt as though they were being replaced, and it got to a point where they were saying that it was either going to be them or it was going to be the robot. Even seeing the phrase, "Die Lester Die," engraved on the staff room table. It was positioned as being about the robot, but the name was spelt differently, so I wonder if Randall's story was just a cover-up. The Lester robot did get destroyed, but because it's obviously a robot and its information is probably backed up to the cloud, a new one was sent back to the Arconia. I thought it was actually kind of fitting that the Lester robot was destroyed in the spot where the human Lester ended up dying. Another main arm of the story is the fact that Oliver was thinking of leaving the Arconia after all of these years. After the tenant staff mingle fest, when Oliver saw that he was ranked by Lester in the ranking of the tenants beyond position number 200. And after seeing that the Arconia pretty much wasn't what it once was due to him being blamed for the building going downhill because it was now the murder building, he was considering accepting an offer that was placed on his apartment that he originally refused. This is something that Mabel obviously didn't want because she had finally got to the point where she was content in her life and was committing to staying in her building. So with Oliver potentially being out of the picture, she'd be down to just having Charles. This was something that Charles would have been fearful of, as he was fearful of everybody moving on without him within the first few episodes. However, with him joining Last Gasp, the dating site, having testosterone and also going on a date with Sofia Cachamilio, his life was now headed in a different direction. A direction that he was a bit more happier with, where he wasn't going to be on his own. There was definitely a clear divide in this episode between the staff, the tenants, the authority, and also the robot. Silence was something that was bored, but as we saw with Ursula, money can also make people talk too. So I feel like that was a small detail that showed that money is key in all of this. The missing person with the finger and the extra person that was present down there on the night where it all went wrong is something that still isn't truly known. But with the notes that were uploaded into the Lester robot, I'm wondering if the trio are going to find out some information on who that could be through that in the next episode, as that seems to be the next thing that Mabel might look to do. My review of the episode. Okay, so we're now at the halfway point of the season, and I think it's a fair place to be able to answer where I think it currently sits when compared to previous seasons of the show. Personally, I don't think it's as good as the previous 2 seasons. I don't think the story is as gripping or has me on the edge of my seat as much as the previous ones. It feels like a little bit of a slow burn, and I don't feel like we've met many suspects or even seen that many clues so far, which I think is a bit of a shame. Usually by now, it feels like that whole finger debacle would have been wrapped up and would have moved on from it, but we're still floating on something that was present right at the start of the season. I like the balance of new versus old when it comes to the future of the Arconia, the people, the mindset, and how it connects to the criminal underworld, but right now, it just feels like the case isn't that well contained. So whilst not necessarily being difficult to follow, it's just not the most enjoyable to follow. I also felt like in the previous seasons, with the likes of Ben being killed and also Saz, they were just more fleshed out characters, so I think I just cared a little bit more about them. There's still 5 episodes left, so I feel like there's a lot more to come, and I definitely do think it'll improve before the end of the season. There were some humorous moments in this episode, and most of them came from my favourite character in the show, Oliver. Martin Short's comedic timing and the way that he delivers his lines just has me in pieces every time that a word comes out of his mouth. So as long as that's in the show, it'll continue to make me laugh. The deeper themes in the show, such as Mabel feeling inferior and Charles fearing progression, were kind of pushed to the side, along with the billionaires, which I thought was a bit strange. But with all of those things being key components to the story, I'm sure they'll get delved into more when the show returns. I'd still say my favourite episode so far is episode 2 from this season. I just hope that we get some more creativity within the episodes, and maybe one that's flashback oriented. That's when I feel Only Murders in the Building is at its best, when it tries something just that little bit different. So, there you have it. Only Murders in the Building Season 5, Episode 5, Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode of Only Murders in the Building Season 5 being broken down, then check the playlist below. And don't forget to subscribe. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.